Welcome to the Tech Simple podcast. Independent insights into the latest AV technologies, as well as tips and best practices to optimise AV solutions for modern workplace and learning environments. Here are your hosts, David and Jonathan from Konnectus AV Consulting.
Welcome to another episode of the Tech Simple podcast. As always, I'm joined by my good friend and co-founder, David Allara. Today, we're going to be discussing AV as a service, and don't be too concerned if you don't understand what that is. It's a very new concept. We're going to be unpacking what it is, but also looking at how we move from our current delivery model to that AV as a service model. To help us unpack AV as a service and provide insight into the potential benefits, today we're joined by Peter Tyler. As owner of Employee Technology Experience at PwC, Peter is responsible for workplace technology and laptop software strategy across all PwC Australia offices. Welcome, Peter.
Thanks for having me, Jonathan and David.
Yeah, it's great to have you on the show here, Pete, and AV as a service. Before we get into AV as a service, though, I thought it might make sense just to talk a little bit about the current go-to model when we're talking about AV upgrades in maybe a large corporate or government environment. And you've got plenty of experience with that, Pete. I mean, what do you typically see as that go-to market model?
Yeah, traditionally it's a CapEx model. So we look to go to an RFP depending on the value of the items, depending on the size of the fit out, if it's part of a new construction, a rejig of existing infrastructure, or a fit out of our buildings, or if it's just a replacement of current technical equipment within the office. But generally it's a go to market, go to RFP, and then from that we then do quite a comprehensive analysis of what we're after, get responses back from the vendors, and then from there it's just a CapEx model requirement from there.
Okay, you're mentioning the word CapEx there a number of times, and that's definitely going to come into relevance when we talk about AV as a service in more detail. So I guess you've got to find some funding up front, don't you, to make this happen in the first place under the current model? Definitely.
And what's traditionally the situation is, whenever we get a new lease or we move into a new building, for example, we find that the landlord will throw in incentives, and there's quite a lot of money that's being splashed around. So getting equipment installed and upgraded and things like that is quite simple. Getting the funding is easy as well, and then you go from there. What is then the challenge is 5, 6, 7 years later is then working out what you then upgrade. And obviously, when you go back to retrofit anything, everything seems so much harder, so much more expensive. And, often, for example, it has to be done after hours because you don't want to interrupt the business. So that adds cost. You've also got refits and changes that need to be done to your building because technology has changed. That also needs to be taken into account. And the other big thing, which is a challenge, is what you often don't do is you don't upgrade everything at once. So what you may do is one office will be upgraded the second office will be year 2, the third office year 3. What you then find is the technology is slightly different throughout those years, which also creates challenge with that sort of model as well.
Understand. Do you think that's related to just coming up with the funds, or is it more of a business interruption? If money was no object, would you do it all together, or would that just not make sense from a business as usual perspective?
There's definitely an element of business interruption. There's also actually doing it. Like if money wasn't an object, you throw an army of people at it, you'd refresh it every 2 to 3 years. That's the wonderful place to be, but then there's the reality of that. That's significant cost. And also running at a team to be able to do that continually as well. You've also got the people side because, any of these sort of projects are heavy on the team, both the internal team, our vendors, and also the other teams, our facilities teams and things like that. So there's a lot to it. It's a big job. There's a lot of planning that goes into this. But then, of course, the actual doing the installation, building access and things like that's also something you've got to take into consideration. And also places like some of the offices in Barangaroo, they're difficult to get access to the loading dock, getting in after hours and things like that as well. So it just all adds to it as well. Where it's a new fit out, everything seems a lot easier.
Yeah, okay, that's great information. Well, maybe let's dive into AV as a service and explore or just at least define what that is.
Sure. So, I look at AV as a service. It's fairly, in my opinion, something that's quite new that isn't really mature in the Australian market. And, we've talked a fair bit together about this as well. There's some vendors who have been doing this for a little while. There's some vendors who are certainly new to it, and some vendors that are saying that they're very good at it. But what we're finding is, what does that mean? Because you go to us for as a service model, it may be that they supply, they'll finance it through an OpEx/leasing model, and then they pull the equipment out at the end. Others will give you a room cost for a period of 5-year term, and then at the end of it, they'll then take it away as well. So then there's other conversations around, they also do a full service model on top of that. So they provide the leasing, the install, and then the removal at the end of it. But of course, the service model as well throughout the term of that. But it seems at the moment, and I'm keen to hear what other people are thinking as well, is it's still something that's still maturing in the Australian space compared to other technologies out there.
So what you're describing, Peter, I mean, when we're saying AV as a service, a lot of people might be thinking, well, you know what, I can go to a vendor and I can finance it and pay my monthly amount. But what you've just described is a lot more than just financing, isn't it? There's other components like the refresh of the room, the support. So what happens, on a day-to-day orientation? What happens in 3 years' time? Is my hardware replaced? These are kind of the key characteristics that separate AV as a service compared to, well, I'll just finance my capital cost and spread it over 5 years.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we're always working towards is the Evergreen model. And, yes, you can look at just doing a basic finance where, you just get a financing agreement. That's easy enough to do. You can get some good deals out there. And then you buy the CapEx model, put it on a finance agreement, and then, in 5 years' time, we'll still be working out what we do. Where I would really see the as a service, though, is truly an evergreen model where, whatever the term of it is, 3, 4, 5 years, I traditionally always thought it was a 5-year. It had to be over 5 years because, all the extended warranties, all the warranties seem to be a 5-year term. However, the tech in 5 years is going to be quite out of date. There's going to be other challenges. There's going to be added support costs, things like that. And also the resale value of the equipment at that stage is going to be lower as well. So you may actually get a better deal. Now, we're still sensing this out. We're still getting, quotes to check this data. But what we really want to do is what's that optimal peak and how do we move to a true evergreen model where literally at the end of the term, it's just replaced. Like the business doesn't see any changes other than the technology. It just sees the cash flow still the same cost each month or a slight variation. And then from there, the tech stays up to date.
So, I mean, as a service is something that I hear quite a lot. There's many industries that are already offering, I think, as a service. Is this something that's already offered in workplace techs, not AV, but other technology stacks?
Yeah, well, printers is probably the biggest one. That's one that's been around for a long time. A lot of vendors do this very, very well. I don't know any company these days who actually purchase their printers outright. Everyone, it's as a service, either through a lease model at the end of it, they'll take it away and you pay a monthly rental. Could be down to a per click or whatever it is, or a bit of both. So, I think the printing industry, they're doing it really well. And it's something I've been looking at. What do they do so well? Go back 10 years or so, I'm sure all the questions are, do you want to outsource your printing? It's a key function, especially 10 years ago. We were so dependent on printing, photocopying, even faxes. Now we're looking at the AV market. It's at that early stage of, do we trust it? Are we sure? Are we there yet? And all those sort of questions. The other one that also is doing really well is, there's the DaaS service, device as a service. So some of the big players in the market are already moving to this model where they're building your laptops for you, deploying them and sending them out to the users, and then at the end of it, collecting them and taking it back. So you reduce your storage space. You're not having, your people pressing next to build a laptop now, and you're not paying for people to box laptops, security costs and everything else. So that is a market I feel is quite mature as well.
So what I'd really like to know, we've talked a little bit about it here in terms of the benefits and what could be gained from AV as a service, but I think for the listeners, it'd be really, really interesting to sort of pin down a large corporate or large government enterprise or even a large university. What would be that if we could just name the top 3 benefits, there's probably 5 or 6, but the very top 3 in order of priority, what do you think, Pete and Jonathan, would be the top 3 that we could list out here?
Look, first of all, I'll be something totally clear about this, is that I still believe that it's a big risk in outsourcing your team to as a service. I still feel that your internal team will always offer a better service. You're not going to have to pay for all the slight moves and changes or something that's slightly out of contract. It's 6:01 on a Friday afternoon and you can't get anyone to stay back. or just the care and also the culture and also the benefits of having staff who know some very senior people within the business as well. So I feel that you can't outsource that completely. Just so you're clear that where I'm looking at as a service really is around the technology and, the firmware, the maintenance and things like that. So for me, the biggest one, though, is that you keep all the technology in lockstep. So an MS Teams unit at the moment looks the way it is. In 2 years' time, they may come out with a new technology. The cameras may look different, maybe better. You can then look at upgrading everything in lockstep. Where if you look at the CapEx model, it always seems to be harder to find money to be able to upgrade every office at the same time. That's probably the one big one I feel is the value. Keen for Jonathan if you want to chime in on number 2 or something.
Yeah, that's quite an interesting idea there. It's about uniformity across all of your sites. If today you're in Sydney and you're using a space that looks one way, when you go to Brisbane tomorrow because you've got a team meeting, you don't want that system to be different. You don't want it to operate different. And having that as a service model lets you do that without a huge capital expense, hitting up all of your sites all in one go.
And one of the biggest shifts I've seen in the industry in the last 2 to 3 years, we've gone from that room where you'd walk into the room, it could do absolutely everything you've ever wanted it to do, but you needed to read a 50-page manual to know how to even use the room. Where we've moved away now to, you walk into a room, the design of everything now, the project, the way you design your strategy, your technical strategy, and then your rooms themselves are all around the user experience. What does the user feel the minute they walk in? What do they see? What can you automate? Sensors. So you walk into the room, the lights come on, the TV comes on. Then you can go up. You have single touch joins integrated with your calendar. It tells the booking system that the room's in operation now. You've got sensors now. So there's so much technology that when you're as a service, you can move with that. And then at the end of it, you rip it out, put the next one in, and you keep paying the monthly cost.
Well, that's really the key item there, isn't it? It's about the benefit of, I'm going to remove a lot of the headache of designing, building, implementing, costing and getting the capital investment. And all I've got to do now, AV as a service, is pay my invoice every month. And that's the extent of my headache. That's really the key benefit there.
Definitely. And look, this is something that we're doing as a firm at the laptop level, where, we've been doing that for several years now. So, at the end of the 3 years, the user gets a brand new laptop. The best part is they get to choose the type of laptop they want. So it really gives them control, allows them to pick how they want to work. And it's even one of the perks now for why you'd want to work with the firm.
It's interesting. So we've really got the key benefits there. We're reducing it down to our monthly invoice, removing the headache. We've created streamlined systems that are the same across all of our sites and can be upgraded regularly. So why are we not doing this right now? What are the limitations in the marketplace today, and why organizations not going down a AV as a service model?
Because a lot of us invested a lot of money in the last 3 years. So we're still going to run the course of those sort of environments before, you look to refresh them. The other big one is that moving to this model, even though, it is an OpEx model that's on a monthly cost, there's been significant investment already. Now to retrofit and add seems to add a huge amount of cost on top of what we've got now. So that's probably the biggest one. The other conversation I've been having with people is with a CapEx model, you can purchase when the business is going great. Like every business goes through the cycles when things are better, not so great. With the CapEx model, when things are great, they can, go out and buy the extra meeting rooms and all the extra equipment. And then when things aren't going so well, you bunker down and you're not spending as much. So there are some benefits as part of that. You can even sweat assets as well. I really dislike that word, but, there is the reality of there are some things you can sweat and you do that.
So, if we go out into the marketplace today and we go out to different vendors, in your view, are there any vendors that can really offer AV as a service, as we spoke about and defined earlier in the piece?
We're still going through that. There's lots of vendors who can do it, yes. Lots of vendors have got some runs on the board to show that they can do it. What I'm not sure about is, can they do it in every state, and can they do it as effectively as what they're saying they can do? Definitely. So I know it can be done. We're still finding, though, or still nervous is probably the main thing at the moment in getting, just as we're learning more about the industry, just making sure we get everything right. So we are looking at the moment what's available, meeting with the vendors to have those sort of discussions now. But at this stage, it's still probably very early days. It's just still an evolving business. And it's something that I feel that since COVID, and all my industry peers, when I talk to them, the AV wasn't treated like a core enterprise system.
Yep.
It's now been treated like that. It's now, you've almost got a seat at the table on the board now, as opposed to in the past where AV was always seen as, just the thing that overhead projectors and what you plug your laptop into when you go into a room. So it's something that's certainly maturing, and it's maturing at a great pace of knots. So what I'm excited to see is what happens over the next 2 years. I really think that we're so close, though.
I've been hearing a similar thing in the marketplace. It's now a core functionality. It's like Wi-Fi. Imagine if you went into your office and the Wi-Fi wasn't working. You couldn't do anything. And as you say, AV used to be overhead projectors and kind of a nice to have. If it doesn't work, oh well, we can continue on. But these days, especially with, blended sessions and hybrid working, you really need those systems operational first time, every time.
And also, as we push towards net zero, PwC as a member firms, or as the global company, is pushing towards net zero by 2030. We need the technology to work. We need the technology to stop the need for people to travel. How do you stop people traveling? You give them the trust and confidence that the technology is going to work first time, every time when they walk into a room. Then they don't have to travel. So then they're only traveling when they, there's other benefits and other reasons to, and there's always people just love traveling as well. But that's, if you remove the lack of confidence as a reason, which as a service I feel can do, that's where the real benefits are, and also helps deliver on net zero and other benefits.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd have to agree. Working first time every time has absolutely become a reality, especially since COVID and with hybrid working or, much more flexible styles. And I really believe the as-a-service model is the future. I see a lot of potential there. I see the companies that take the time and effort to invest in that space and work towards being able to deliver yes, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, we can guarantee your AV will work first time every time. Just pay me my $500 a month per room, or whatever the figure is, for the next 3 years, and be done with it. I think that is absolutely the future. We're not quite there yet. There is one other, limitation that I see in the market just at the moment, especially from a vendor perspective. If I was going to put my vendor hat on, there's so many technology options out there in the market. It's a plethora of choice, and as a customer, you want to have this and have that and the best of everything. But when you are looking for that as a service model, I think it's probably in the short term unrealistic to be able to get what you want, like just off a la carte menu. I think there are going to be some restrictions. I think vendors are going to have to be able to say, well, I can offer you as a service, but you'll have to choose from vendor A or B, or maybe vendor C, and then I can give you those guarantees of work first time every time at affordable price points. But in the longer term, hopefully that will become a little bit better, and there'll be a little bit more flexibility of choice. So lots of things to look forward to.
Yeah, definitely. So watch this space.
All right. Well, I think that's probably it as a service topic today. We really appreciate your contributions there, Peter, and coming on to the show with Jonathan and I. It sounds like what we've covered is, as a service, is definitely something large corporate, government, education enterprises can be looking at seriously. There are going to be a few caveats, but I think if you have the patience and are willing to invest, the rewards are there in the short term and definitely the long term. So thanks very much, Peter and Jonathan.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Tech Simple podcast. To like, share, or discover more episodes, head over to Spotify. If you'd like to talk to us about AV in your workplace or learning environment, book an initial discovery call with David or Jonathan at konnectus.com.au. And remember,
Tech Simple!